Maya Caldwell had been a nurse for 12 years. She had seen things that most people never see in a lifetime. She had held hands through last breaths, talked softly to patients who could no longer talk back, and stood in hallways at 2 in the morning when the rest of the world was fast asleep. She was not famous. She was not powerful. She was just a night nurse, steady, quiet, and very, very good at her job. The hospital was called Mercy General. It sat on the edge of the city like a tired old building that refused to stop working. At night, the hallways were long and pale under the fluorescent lights, and the only sounds were the beeping of monitors and the soft footsteps of whoever happened to be walking by. Most people found the night shift exhausting. Maya found it honest. At night, there were no visitors, no politics, no performance. There was only the patient and the nurse and whatever the body was trying to say. It was a Tuesday in late October when the man arrived. He came in on a military transport, that much was clear. 2 men in plain dark clothing walked beside the stretcher and never left his side. They did not introduce themselves. They did not answer questions. They showed a single document to the charge nurse, and that seemed to be enough. The man on the stretcher was listed on his wristband only as 09. No full name, no next of kin, no address. His file was thin, just a few lines about blunt trauma, blood loss, and the fact that he had already survived 1 surgery somewhere else before being brought here. Maya was assigned to him that night. She pulled a chair close to his bed and began the work she always began, checking his vitals, watching the monitors, studying his face. He was unconscious, but breathing on his own. His numbers were not great, but they were not terrible either. By the hospital's standards, he was stable. She wrote that in the chart, then she sat back and kept watching. Around midnight, something shifted. She could not explain it with numbers. The monitors had not changed. His heart rate was the same. His blood pressure was the same. But Maya felt it the way a sailor feels a storm before the clouds arrive. Something in the color of his skin, something in the tiny movement of his eyes beneath the closed lids. Something in the way his breathing had become just slightly too controlled, like a machine running harder than it should to keep up. She had felt this before, not often, but enough times to know she was right. She noted every observation in his chart with a timestamp. Then she called the on-call resident, a young doctor named Dr. Anand Mehta, who was finishing his 2nd year and still learning to trust himself. He came quickly, looked at the monitors and frowned. Not because he saw a problem, but because he didn't. The numbers were fine, he said so gently. I know the numbers look fine, Maya said, but something is off. I'd like to page Dr. Pierce. Dr. Mehta hesitated. Everyone hesitated before paging Dr. Harlan Pierce at night. Dr. Harlan Pierce was the director of the ICU. He was also brilliant, and he knew it. He had trained at one of the best hospitals in the country, published more papers than most people read in a lifetime, and ran his unit with the kind of precision that made other doctors either admire him or fear him. He was not known for being kind, he was not known for being patient, and he was not known for enjoying phone calls at 2 in the morning from nurses who had feelings about patients. But Dr. Mehta paged him anyway. Pierce arrived 20 minutes later in a pressed shirt, his hair neat, his expression already sharp with something that was not quite anger but was close to it. He walked to the monitors first, as he always did, and studied them for a long moment. Then he looked at the chart. Then he looked at Maya. You paged me, he said, because of a feeling. It was not a question. It was a sentence he had already decided the answer to. Maya kept her voice calm. His skin tone has changed slightly. His breathing pattern has a subtle irregularity that isn't showing on the monitor yet. In my experience, your experience, Pierce repeated, and there was something in the way he said it that made the word feel small. He turned to Dr. Mehta as if Maya had stopped speaking. Hold the current protocol. His numbers are within range. If something changes, page me through the resident. He clicked his pen. Don't pull me out of bed for instincts. He said the last word, the way some people say a joke, with a little smile that lets everyone know they're not really joking. One of the younger residents laughed softly. A technician looked at the floor. Maya said nothing. She waited until Pierce was in the elevator before she turned back to the room. She quietly ordered a secondary blood panel. She documented every single observation, the time, the detail, her reasoning, with precision. She moved the crash cart 6 feet closer to 09's room. She pulled a second IV line and checked that it was clear and ready. She did not do these things to prove a point. She did them because she believed they were necessary, and she had stopped waiting for permission to believe in herself a long time ago. 22 minutes passed. Then every monitor in the room changed at once. 09's blood pressure dropped fast, the kind of fast that has no gradual warning, no gentle slope. It fell like something had been cut. The monitors screamed. His heart rate spiked, then stuttered. His oxygen level began to sink. Dr. Mehta went pale. Maya was already moving. She called the code in a clear, even voice that carried without shouting. She directed the team to their positions. The crash cart was already there. She pushed the correct medications in the correct order, without pausing to look anything up. When the blood panel came back, the one Pierce had not ordered, the one she had ordered in the dark, while everyone else thought she was being dramatic, it showed exactly what she had suspected. A slow internal bleed that had been invisible to the earlier imaging, building quietly for hours until it couldn't anymore. She handed the result to Dr. Mehta. He read it. His face changed. Pierce was paged a second time. When he walked back into the ICU, the room was moving. People were calling things out. A monitor was being adjusted. Maya was at the center of it, not panicking, not performing, just working, doing the things she had always done. Pierce stopped at the nurse's station. He read the blood panel. He read Maya's chart notes, all of them, with their timestamps. He stood very still. Then a new person appeared at the entrance of the ICU. He did not run. He did not raise his voice. He was tall and moved in the way that certain people move, not in a hurry, but without wasting a single step. He showed a badge to the charge nurse at the door. She stepped aside. He walked directly across the unit toward Pierce. He stopped about 1 foot away. He said nothing for a moment. Then he leaned close and spoke in a voice so low that only Pierce could hear. "Raven is here, doctor." Pierce did not move for 3 full seconds. And then something happened to his face. Not embarrassment, not surprise exactly, but a kind of settling, the way a man looks when he understands the size of what he's standing in front of. He looked back at the room, at the man on the bed, at the team working around him. He looked at Maya. The man who had spoken stepped back. He was Commander Voss, though no one in that room except Pierce knew his name at that moment, or his rank, or what he did for a living. He turned so that the room could hear him. "She's the only reason he's still alive right now," Voss said. "Don't touch her protocols." He said it simply, not aggressively, not as a challenge, just as a fact, delivered by someone who had no reason to say anything except the truth. The room kept working. Monitors beeped, medications were administered, but something had shifted in the air, something quiet and permanent. 09 was stabilized just before 4 in the morning. His bleed was controlled. His blood pressure returned slowly to a range that let the team breathe again. He was moved to a secure surgical floor before the sun came up. The 2 men in plain dark clothing followed the stretcher down the hall and disappeared through a set of doors that required a separate clearance to enter. Commander Voss left the ICU without speaking to anyone else. He did not thank the team. He did not leave a card. He paused once at the nurse's station, looked at Maya for a moment, with an expression that was impossible to read. Not quite gratitude, not quite recognition, something older than both, and then he walked out. Dr. Pierce stayed. He reviewed the chart fully, finished the paperwork, and stood at the window of the ICU for a while before he left. He did not apologize. He did not explain. He simply became, for the rest of that night, very quiet. Maya worked until her shift ended at 7. She gave the morning nurse a thorough handover, drank half a cup of cold coffee in the break room, and drove home in the pale gray light of the early morning. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel angry. She felt tired, the way she always felt after a night that mattered. And she felt something smaller and quieter underneath that, something that felt like being seen. 4 days later, a plain envelope arrived at the hospital. Her name was on the front. No return address. Inside was a single card. No letterhead. No official seal. Just a few handwritten words in clean, careful print. Your instincts saved a life that mattered to many. Thank you. She read it twice. Then she folded it and put it in her locker, between a photo of her daughter and an old notepad she used for shift notes. She never told anyone about the note. She was not sure why, exactly. Maybe because it felt private. Maybe because it said what it needed to say, and saying it out loud would have made it into something else. A story, a performance, a thing that belonged to other people's conversations. It was hers. She kept it. The staff noticed, in the weeks that followed, that Dr. Pierce had changed in a small but real way. He still arrived with the same precision. He still ran the unit with the same high standard. But he began to pause when nurses spoke. He began to ask follow-up questions instead of closing conversations. He began to stay 2 minutes longer in the room when a nurse said that something felt off, even when the monitors said otherwise. No one said anything about it directly. That is not how things change in hospitals. They change through small adjustments, repeated over time, until the environment is different from what it was before, and no one can quite point to the exact moment it shifted. Maya's next shift was the following Tuesday. Same ward, same ICU, same long hallway under the same fluorescent lights. There were 3 new patients that night, and not enough staff and a monitor on bed 4 that kept giving false readings. She moved through it all the way she always did, efficiently, carefully, with the kind of attention that looks like calm, but is actually the product of 12 years of nights that never looked the same twice. She was not celebrated. No award was given. No story was published in the hospital newsletter. The man known as 09 was gone, transferred somewhere classified, already becoming a detail in a file that most people would never be allowed to read. And Maya was still a night nurse, paid the same, scheduled the same, invisible to most of the world in the way that people who do necessary and unglamorous work are always invisible. But she knew what she had done. And in the strange, silent economy of doing something right, when it would have been easy to let it go, when the director had already left, when the monitors said everything was fine, when the easier choice was to trust the authority in the room instead of the knowledge in her own hands, she had chosen correctly. She had been right, and her being right had mattered, and a person was alive because of it. That was enough. It was more than enough. It was, in fact, everything. Maya Caldwell clocked in for her shift, checked her patients, and got to work. Outside, the city moved through its daytime life, loud, bright, full of itself. Inside the ICU, the monitors beeped in their steady rhythm, and the night moved forward, the way it always does, one careful hour at a time.